In this learning module, we will discuss stereotypes of African American men and the role that they play in shaping images of Black men. By the time you finish this module, you will be able to recognize some of the major stereotypes of Black men. You will also be able to see how media depictions of these stereotypes endure and evolve over time. Before we catalog these stereotypes, we must first discuss why such stereotypes exist. Many of the stereotypes of Black males originated in slavery, and they were designed to keep slaves in their place. Now, we need to think about these stereotypes as being on opposite ends of the spectrum. On one end of the spectrum, we see Black men as being characterized as violent and hypersexual. On the other end of the spectrum, we see Black men as being defined as docile and asexual. Regardless of their content, the practice of applying stereotypes to Black men remains a common occurrence in our society. The first stereotype that we will discuss is called the Uncle Tom. It comes from the 1852 anti-slavery novel by Harriet Beecher Stowe. It was the second best-selling novel in the 19th century behind the Bible. It features the character Uncle Tom, a dutiful, long-suffering, and faithful servant. He's defined as being eager to please whites and to gain their approval, even if that means the betrayal of other Blacks. He is simple-minded, and his smile signifies not only happiness, but also he is not a threat to whites. The Uncle Tom stereotype is defined as being asexual and not a sexual threat to white women. Usually this character is elderly, but not always. If we think about American culture, we see this Uncle Tom figure a lot. If we think about Uncle Remus from Brer Rabbit, we can talk about the 1946 Disney film Song of the South. We see an elegant Uncle Tom figure in Bojangles with Shirley Temple. We also see this character in ads such as the Uncle Ben. He's the face of rice. And we see this basically as a Black man who is smiling and always attempting to please whites. The second stereotype that we will discuss is the coon stereotype. Now, we're not sure exactly where this stereotype originated from. The word may have originated from barracoon, Spanish or Portuguese word for slave pens or barracks for slaves. It also may come from the term raccoon, which had a tendency to steal. Also, the stereotype is also referred as the Sambo. The coon is defined as a Black buffoon, naive, childish, silly, and used for comic relief if we think about early depictions of African Americans. If we think about this character is defined as being friendly, nonviolent, and wears a wide-eyed smile. African American men are defined as feeble-minded and childlike because they need to be guided and taken care of by white slave owners. Also, the narrative of an African American man not being hardworking justifies the brutality of trying to enforce or make Black men work hard and be punished, and also putting African American men under observation. Classic depictions of the coon can be seen in Buckwheat from The Little Rascals. We also see this image if we think about Step and Fetch, the lazy millionaire, 20-year-old, 30-year-old African-American man. We also see, if we want to talk about an updated stereotype of the coon in Cuba Gooding Jr.'s characters in Jerry Maguire. We see him talking about Show Us the Money, and he also wins an Oscar in 1996 for this depiction. The final stereotype that we will discuss is called the buck. It is a slave reference. It is the human equivalent of a breeder animal, a strong male meant to represent the best physical attributes of its species, and therefore used to breed quote-unquote strong stock. There was also a savage practice called buck breaking, in which a surly slave was beaten brutally publicly by slave masters as a strategy to deter slaves from rebelling. Black bucks, as the stereotype suggests, are brutal, violent, dangerous, barbaric, hypersexual. The buck reference is like an animal. A black man could work hard in the field all day, be forced to reproduce, and be whipped, punished, and controlled by white slave owners. In the picture that we see is of Ken Norton in the film Mandingo from 1975. This is a black man stripped down to his underwear. He's muscular. The black body is supposed to symbolize strength, youth, and also sexuality. If we look at the updated picture, we see a depiction of Denzel Washington in the film Training Day, where he wins an Academy Award in 2002. We see him as a thug, an aggressive, amoral African-American man. So we do see these depictions of African-American men evolving and changing over time, but the basic characterization of African-American male stereotypes still stayed intact. So what are the consequences of stereotypes of African-American men? Well, it's very difficult for our society to see black men as victims if we think about institutional racism, and particularly if we talk about the criminal justice system. African-American men are coded as being criminals, thugs, and have particular behaviors that lead to them being incarcerated. A lot of these images are exaggerated if we talk about African-American men, or simply do not exist. If we think about stereotypes of black men as being dangerous, we see that if we talk about early history, we think about Emmett Till in 1955 being killed because he's defined as being reckless and eyeballing a white woman. This black buck stereotype comes into play. If we talk about Rodney King being beaten by police in 1992 and him saying, "Can't we all just get along?" People sometimes portray him as an Uncle Tom figure because he was brutalized by the police, and then he talks about racial harmony. We can also think about more recently the death of Trayvon Martin at the hands of George Zimmerman, a neighborhood volunteer that defines him as violent and someone who should be placed under observation. To continue this discussion, we can talk about Mike Brown and Eric Gardner being killed in 2004 under suspicious circumstances by white police officers. It is clear that in many instances we don't recognize the humanity of African American men and what they go through on an everyday basis. These stereotypes were created during slavery, but still influence the ways that we think about African American men now as being angry, aggressive, and violent. We also do not think about the level of anxiety and stress that's caused by African American men to try to in some way challenge these stereotypes.